Kia ora. Welcome back. Right, we're through to number 14 on our order paper, and it's around the review of the CEDA, the Central Economic Development Agency's appointment of directors policy, and I'll just invite Sarah from Governance to the table, and that's page 51.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Following direction from Council, the CEDA Electoral College have reviewed and recommend the appointments policy, which is attached. The major changes have been around the reappointment of incumbents. So we've expanded that section. We got rid of the exceptional circumstances clause, and we've enabled incumbents to be reappointed or recommended to be reappointed by the Electoral College to provide more flexibility. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Isabella.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. I had a question about clause 2.1. That second paragraph there says the range and quality of skills will vary from one position to another. I just wondered what is meant by position, or what's the intent of the drafting?
So there's been no change to the current policy on that. That, I guess, enables people to consider financial skills versus governance skills, depending on what is needed by the board and what the applicants have.
Is that not captured in 2.2?
Yes, it's probably just doubling up.
Cool, thank you. And I had a question about the staggering of appointments with the intent of that to get a rotation of 1/3 of the board each year. How that works with a reappointment of first-term directors if the number of directors is less than 6?
It doesn't affect the staggering as such, because it would just, that first-term incumbent would still be up for re-election. It would just be the opportunity for the Electoral College to recommend an appointment without having to go for a full interview process.
And that was for first-term incumbents?
Correct,
to
yes.
roll over to a second?
Yeah, so they'd be allowed up to 6 years. If they were then to reapply after their 2 terms, they'd have to go for the full interview process. Yeah.
And so then with the intent of the staggering being that 1/3 of the board approximately cycles off every year.
Yeah.
And then you're hypothetically reappointing for periods of 6 years, and then the board gets down to, say, 4 members. Just wondering how that works in practice.
Okay. No, you wouldn't go down to 4 members. You'd maintain I think it's 6 at the moment, but it would just mean that you're having the opportunity to review 1/3 of them every year or so.
Okay, cool. And then clause 1.4 is pretty much a blanket override clause, as previously.
Correct, yes. That gives councils the opportunity to override their policy if they wish to.
Great, thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Sarah. Can you just remind us what triggered this review?
I believe it was the exceptional circumstances clause that has, which caused a bit of division between the 2 shareholders. So.
I would agree. That was my memory of it as well. So I'm surprised to see the change is not to just take out the exceptional circumstances, but to basically just allow reappointment under 3.8 without any advertising at all for anyone. So how did we go from councillors raising objections to the use of the exceptional circumstances to allow someone to be rolled over to now everybody can be rolled over. It seems to me to be the opposite direction of what I was expecting.
The new clause only affects a first-term board member. It's only if they meet the requirements of the section, so there's links to whether there's a need for that particular person, if they've done a good job as a director in CEDA. So they have to meet those requirements as well. And then it's an opportunity for the Electoral College to decide whether to reappoint them without asking them to go through the full process. And it would always be the opportunity of the council to whether they appoint that person.
I hear what you're saying. I guess I don't think you've really answered my question, which is, given that the discomfort of elected members was around the use of the exceptional circumstances rule to re-appoint people without going out to the market, how have we landed up in a situation when we're reviewing the policy that we've gone even more in the direction of reappointing people without going to the market rather than less?
Council's asked the Electoral College to review the policy. These are the recommendations made from the Electoral College. It is up to the council, I guess, to decide whether they agree with the draft policy or not.
Okay.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on this reappointment of incumbent addition, is there an intention when next reviewing our own internal appointment of trustees to replicate this kind of approach?
Yes, there is. The initial intention was, of course, for our own appointments policy to mirror the agreed CEDA appointments policy. But I will bring our own appointments policy back to the chamber in the next 6 months or so. There's a bit of work involved in that. So depending on what council does today, we will seek further guidance on exactly what we want to do with our own.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions, Sarah. I guess firstly around the changes that have come through from the electoral colleges, is there any other information provided by the electoral college other than just a track change copy? The sorts of information that might explain the rationale around some changes?
I might open that up to members of the Electoral College to answer.
Well, no, my question to you is there anything documented?
Oh, no, there's not. No.
There's no documentation behind this other than track changes?
Yes, there is. Sorry, we did do the paperwork that I provided to the Electoral College. There is changes on that, but it was mostly me recommended drafting from myself, which was then agreed by the Electoral College. So,
okay, that's helpful
from the discussion that was had at the meeting.
Great, thank you. In terms of 3.7, it looks like a move to be less reliant on a independent recruitment process there and just really zoom back into the electoral college. Was that something that had been signaled in terms of the concerns that elected members had voted on in terms of bringing this up for review?
No, it hadn't, but of course the council or the shareholders asked for the Electoral College to go and review the policy in full, and this was an area which the Electoral College identified as not current practice, so that's why we have removed the direct reference to recruitment agencies.
So not current practice as in it was in the policy, but we weren't actually following the policy?
Do you want to answer that one?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So when my understanding of when this policy was drafted was that the the vision of what the shareholders were looking for at the time was to look quite wide across the country, and thus a recruitment company was used initially to make sure that directors from all around the motu were looked at. Of recent cycles, the focus has very much been to make sure that the directors on this CCO understand this region and are connected to this region, and thus of recent times, no, I have not needed to use a recruitment company in order to advertise in the market and successfully appoint.
Thanks. So to be clear, then there was a policy that said we're going to do a certain process, and there was a decision either from staff or the Electoral College to set that aside and do something more pragmatic.
It's an option. It's an option.
Pragmatically, it was unnecessary. So I think pragmatically, the Electoral College is saying that it's unnecessary to have it in the policy.
Thanks. Not to labor the point too much, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is the old policy, was it being followed or not?
You well know, because I've brought this to you several times in the last, every year, the last 3 years, that a recruitment company has not been used for those processes, correct?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just in terms of 3.8, the proposed changes to be able to have people basically have 6 years rather than 3 years with the confirmation from the chair. If we're not comfortable with those changes and want to remove the changes and keep it so that people reapply every 3 years, how will that work in terms of Manawatu districts' desire to have a different process than that? Can we have a different process to them, or would they then have to look at that again?
No, the two councils need to have the same process because they're appointing to the same body. What would happen if we didn't agree this? Manawatu is meeting tomorrow to discuss it. We would have to probably go back to the Electoral College would probably have to meet again and review the changes.
So can we just move an amendment though at this meeting to remove the changes in 3.8? Why would the Electoral College have to meet?
I'm saying because we'd need both councils to agree the same policy. So if we make a change today, I feel that Manawatu couldn't agree their policy tomorrow because it would be different. So the Electoral College would have to meet again to discuss the proposed changes from this council and to agree for both councils to have the same policy. So, sorry.
So if we remove that change, so what's the best process if we're not comfortable with that aspect of what's proposed, as in the rolling over of the 3-year term, making it essentially a 6-year term?
I'll just get governance manager to answer.
If this council wished to have a different policy, I would recommend that the council put a motion to recommend to the Electoral College what you would like to see and send it back to the Electoral College.
And so could that recommendation be as outlined here but without the changes in 3.8?
Yeah, so you could recommend that the Electoral College consider whatever it is that you'd like to see, paragraph 1 removed or whatever it is.
Okay, thank you.
All right. As part of the Electoral College, is it appropriate I make a couple of comments? Because I think we were... I'll put it on the table and then I'll... Yeah, thank you. If we could just get the recommendation up. So, colleagues, you appointed us as Electoral College, and yes, realise some elected members have a different view on things, and I appreciate that, it's democracy, but you did appoint us as your representatives. We went into that meeting knowing that you had a certain level of comfort on some things and not on others. If I could just address the option of the recruiter, because I was around when we did set up CEDA and we did use a professional recruiter at quite some cost, you know, I think about $60,000. And when we were doing the, I suppose the applications for directors and the process, we did it again once, and it did seem to be a double up of the skill set we have in our team here in governance. So it was something that was deemed by everybody that it was unnecessary and not pragmatic to keep that. We've still got an option to use that if we need to, but it just seemed to be a sensible spend to not do that. In terms of the other elements there, so the electoral college is the two mayors. In MDC, it's the deputy mayor and another councillor, senior councillor there. On our side, it's myself, the chair of finance, and the chair of economic. And I'll be really honest, we've gone through this a couple of times, and if there's no confidence in what we're doing, then you know, I might as well get somebody else to do it, because it doesn't seem like you agree with what the leadership and the electoral college is doing. We were unanimous on the pieces of work. We had a workshop and with our colleagues here in the Missoula room. Perhaps we, in hindsight, maybe some of there should have been perhaps some notes or minutes. Pretty hard when we were putting stickies on different parts of the policy, and we knew that this was probably the reappointment part was a bit of a sticky one. One or two probably want to go further, but they realise that we don't have some of you don't have a desire to do that. So I might just pass it to Councillor Dennison to perhaps speak to that as well. So look, I'm happy to move those. If you don't want to do some part of it, I'll be really honest, I will withdraw from the electoral college, because it's just a total waste of my time if we can't go down this path, because we've gone down it twice now. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to speak to the key items, which are the appointment process or using a recruitment consultant and the reappointment to a first-term incumbent. So the recruitment, I think the Mayor's covered that fairly well, is that it hasn't been our recent process. It comes with a huge cost, and in the early periods when we were using it, we ended up in the establishment with a board that were pretty much all from outside Palmerston North bar one, I think, and they actually come to us and actually said, could we have another director that had more local knowledge? So we extended, I think, the directorship from 5 to 6. That's how that first happened. And so the importance of having some local connection was increased its value, and that the administration between our councils, and it's been our city that's been providing that, has still conducted the promotion of candidates and provided the facilitation for the interview process, etc. So, and that's handled as you'd expect for any other process that we run, for any of our other CCOs, for example. So it's very pure and aligned to that similar process. As the electoral college, we have our different views of being able to shortlist those candidates, and we do get a wide pool of candidates, and not everyone's local. So it is of interest to the wider governance community that putting their names forward, so it's not like we're at risk of not having good quality candidates applying. And then we get the opportunity to shortlist. And with the rotation, there's some submitting for candidacy for a second or third term, up to 3 terms consecutively. Where we come to, let's talk about the reappointment of the first term, is that there was a belief and appreciated that the district wanted to be able to do it initially purely, not just for the first term, but for the following tenure. And we know there's no appetite for that. But what we can appreciate is that in a lot of cases, we get better value out of a second term of a candidate being appointed than what we do in the first term. And I think that's true for any governance board, not just for CEDA. And so that appreciation of having an option where we don't have to go to an interview and actually be comfortable with their performance for that first period and say, up against the other applications that we've got, we have a level of comfort to reappoint. Let me outline how the process would work. So we can still go to the pool that have applied and say, hey, there's some good candidates here, or there's not, when we go to recruit. And when we actually interview one of the existing board members in that pool, we typically have only limited it to another couple, when we might, in effect, if there's another worthy candidate, we could maybe include, with agreement with the district, have a wider look. Because each interview takes time, as you can appreciate, and you're interviewing up to 5 candidates, and I think it's been the case in several of our appointments. There's a fair time invested by all parties to do that due diligence. So, if we in an interview and we find that there is some other worthy candidates that are actually worthy of some further thought, the Electoral College still has the opportunity in the process to be prompted to maybe reconsider the possible reappointment of the existing board member. It's not a fait accompli, it's an option that's given to the Electoral College, and so you should have confidence that we've taken a wider look and still having a pause to reconsider if the current ones that are in their first term looking for a second actually need to be called in to be interviewed and actually be lined up against some of the other worthy candidates, maybe not room for an appointment at that period. So I feel that's really robust. And I think that is reasonable. And then for a third term, as we know, I think that's a point where we do go back to the market and they have to go back through that interview process. And not always would they be reappointed for that period out. So whether it's for the second term or the third term, there's no guarantees for that director. And the Electoral College, you know, we've got to recognise that we're not the sole party to the appointment process. We're a 50% party to CEDA. And so to get some sort of compromise with our partners, with our district, I think something that's, that has wide agreement, I think, is fair. We have voiced that there is not a strong view to do this around our table. They know that, and of course when we got backlash when this actually happened, to go back into the interview process last time, which did prompt this, they're aware of that. That did frustrate them. They thought that was ridiculous. But nevertheless, we did go through the due diligence and went through that process, and the outcome actually was the same. So we would recommend to you that it was unanimously agreed. And these were the 2 central points to the review out of everything that was open up. So we looked at every section of the policy. We highlighted our stickies onto the wall of what we wanted to spend the most time on, and this was the outcome. So it was fair, transparent. Well, it wasn't notes, it was everyone had a fair view on what to speak up on, and these were the highlights of going through. So when we say, oh, we're going to vote against it and go back through, I'll really have to say to you that this is a 50-50 agreement. We want to have some compatibility with our view. I feel like this is a reasonable approach for the reasons as I outlined, that it's not a fait accompli, and that we will be ultimately appointing the best people available for that period in the rotation. So they're my comments, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
And I'll go to the other Electoral College member, Councillor Harper.
Thank you. I haven't got a lot more to add because I think Councillor Dennison said it all. The only one thing I wanted to say was I do think this should be looked to be applied across all of the other CCOs. I think that's the biggest learning that I think we've got. I think all of the other CCOs should look at the same kind of setup, because this is the way that we should be looking at it. When we're looking at getting candidates that do apply, we should be keeping that knowledge on there as best we can around our board tables, because some of these boards, it is hard to attract them to our CCOs, and when we lose them, it's losing, that knowledge is walking out the door. So particularly for 3.8, if you're wanting to move 3.8 and it goes, it is hard to keep people. Sorry if I'm losing you, Karen, but if we're trying to move 3.8, it is really hard to keep people around a board table, and we're actually trying to retain them. So I think if we can try and keep people around a board table, that is the best way to do it, is by keeping them there after the first term. That's why I think we should be looking to retain it. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Naylor.
Oh, it was me, sorry, next.
Oh. How did
You had already put my microphone on, you just didn't say my name.
Sorry, councillor.
Okay, thank you. I just had a question before I make a comment, based on what councillor Dennison was just saying. So under 3.8, reappointment of incumbent, do you advertise and interview other people? Is it just that you don't re-interview the incumbent, or do you not advertise, you just roll over the incumbent?
I think for the, yeah, no, not to the mayor. I was going to say to the administrator, if we could, the interpretation of policy in 3.1, where it says at the discretion of the electoral college, be recommended for reappointment without going to an interview through the formal process. Perhaps it's better if it's the officer that answers that, or did you want an answer from me?
What I understood from what you were saying, because you said, oh, well, we've got a pool of applicants and then we make the decision. And I want to be clear whether currently, because you're just using the exceptional circumstances, so it wouldn't make too much difference, whether you are advertising and shortlisting and interviewing everybody except perhaps the incumbent, because you feel you know them quite well, or whether reappointment of incumbent is done without advertising, without seeing who else is out there, without interviewing anybody else. That's the difference I want to try and establish. Is it, which one is it? Because from what you were saying, you do advertise, you do interview other people, but you might still decide to re-employ the incumbent without an interview. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yep. Perhaps I'll first go over it, and then perhaps the administrator can have follow-up to what I would say. So, just so happened that this term, this time we had a recruitment process, we had some applications to go through. And understanding we've got a staggered appointment process, so I can see the eventuality where we won't need, if there was a director and there was only one retiring and we thought they were in their first term and worthy of a second, would we go to the market? And I get your point that there's probably an anomaly that I didn't describe, but it's also very likely that you could have somebody going for a third term or expired their term, and that we do need to go to the market. So I was using an example where we marry up, which is where we do have to go to the market, but perhaps the administrator could cover that eventuality when there was only reappoint first term looking to reappoint. Did you want to cover that?
Theoretically, the expectation would be that you would be cycling off more than one member at a time. So the process, as I see it in a normal situation, would be that, as it's proposed here, would be that the electoral college may meet and may be interested in reappointing a first termer to a second term, and they would do the due diligence that's set out in the policy and make sure that all the criteria have been met. If that was the case, then they would still need to advertise for the second position, and so they would still be going to the market. Potentially, they then have shortlisted and interviewed and found that they have two candidates that they actually think are better than the incumbent, and then they would have a decision to make.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll make my comment now then, thank you. See, what I didn't like about the previous policy and what I will be trying to avoid in the revised policy is people being reappointed without us going to the market. What I want to avoid is a situation where we get very cosy with some of our mates and we say, oh, we'll just give you another term, and we don't actually go out to the market and see who's available, see if there's a better person available, and then interview them. I'm not saying that we have to interview an incumbent if we know them. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm not saying that if the incumbent isn't the best person that we shouldn't reappoint them. I'm not saying that either. But what I want to avoid is this situation where we just roll someone over without going to the market, without determining that they're the best person for the job. Because ultimately, I think that's not doing our economic development agency any favours. We want to make sure we've got the best people for the job there. If you don't go out to the market, and I've heard this argued by pretty much everybody in this room at one time or another, if you don't go out to the market, you don't see who's there, you don't know that you have got the best person for the job. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. So just to be clear, I'm not against reappointing the incumbent if they're the best person for the job. What I am against is a process that allows the incumbent to be reappointed without going out to the market, without determining that they are genuinely the best person for the job. The problem I have with 3.8 and the problem I had with the exceptional circumstances clause is it does allow the Electoral College to roll over someone's appointment without going out to the market. And that, I think, is a failing. And my understanding of why this policy was being reviewed was because some of us did raise objections to the use of the exceptional circumstances clause, which was used in order to roll someone over. And my expectation was that that would be removed. And instead, we've gone far the other way. So I'm sorry if people are taking it personally. Maybe there was a misunderstanding of what the problem was in the first place. But ultimately, my aim in all of this is that we have the best people on the board. How can you have the best people on the board if you haven't gone out to the market and see who's out there? So I don't know what we do with this clause. I can see that in some circumstances, if you've got two positions and you're looking for one new one, and you might roll the incumbent over and you might interview 5 or 6 people, okay, then I'd be satisfied with that. But if you're not interviewing anyone, if you're just rolling over a person, how can you possibly say that you've got the best person for the job? So that's my concern with it.
Okay, Councillor Bowen.
It might be a question, sorry, because I was a little confused maybe by Councillor Dennison's description, and I think you have covered some of that, but I wonder whether we're missing the word full in that first bullet point. Are you talking about they may, at the discretion of the Electoral College, be recommended for reappointment without going through a full formal appointment process to still give ability to draw people in for interview if necessary, rather than not have to go through the whole process at all?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think that's actually, that's what we imagine would happen, because you're always going to have a couple that are rolling off. You have a third of your board rolls off, and even if you did look at one and go, yes, they look good to be go through the one gate, you're still going to go to the market, you know.
Yeah, I'd certainly be feeling a lot more comfortable if we'd managed to capture that flexibility of process, I think as you described it, Councillor Dennison, to where we are interviewing other people, we might bring candidate in for interview alongside that, or we might consider them on the papers alongside an interview. And look, I probably take a little bit of a different view to some colleagues on this one, because I sit on the CCO interview panels, and I know the pain that this is a lot of the time, and I feel like sometimes we've not made either the best decisions or decisions that are well supported by our CCOs themselves, in whom we've recommended for appointment. And I see this being a really pragmatic way of being able to work with our CCOs for that ongoing success of the CCO, that you keep important knowledge around the table. You know, in some very recent rounds, I know for a fact we've lost 2 good board members by applying our policy, by people either not wanting to give the time to going through a process, or going through a process unsuccessfully and then declining the opportunity to be co-opted because they felt like they didn't have the confidence of council. So it's been the day of unintended consequences, I think. We get some unintended consequences through the best intentions of our current policy, and I am interested in exploring how we might take a more pragmatic approach. So with my suggestion around that inclusion of the word full there, which I think gives some flexibility, I'm maybe not as uncomfortable as some others with what we're proposing.
Councillor Bellin.
Do I need to move full as an amendment, or is that a minor?
It's a minor amendment.
Thanks.
Councillor Bellin.
Thank you. I do appreciate all the work that's been done to make this policy more robust. Although I am disappointed to hear that our commitment to due diligence was seen as ridiculous by our partners, as I understand this is a paid position. So that's what makes it different to our other CCOs. When public money is involved, due diligence isn't the worst thing. But anyway, my dissatisfaction with this policy is actually just limited to still having clause 1.4 as an override clause, because it has no qualifying conditions around the triggering of that clause. So that, in effect, really makes this more of a guiding document than a policy. And the other point being that if you do have a membership of between 4 and 6, and if it's sitting at less than 6, and you have the ability to reappoint for a second 3-year term, and you're intending for an annual turnover of a third of the board in order to bring in the fresh blood, I just don't see how that those track in practice. But I don't consider that a fatal flaw. I'm more uncomfortable with the idea that we attempt to draft policy on the fly. So I will take this in good faith, because even if we do make changes to clause 3.8, 1.4 still applies and can override it. So, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am quite comfortable with the first 3 changes that are proposed in this paper, but the rolling over of board members for a further 3 years just at the chair's discretion, I'm not comfortable with, for very similar reasons that have already been outlined by Councillor Johnson and others. To me, it really muddies the waters when what I'm hearing from Councillor Dennison and others, if I'm understanding correctly, is that the existing board member then, once having interviewed other new people, can actually be pulled in for an interview. I mean, it needs to be clear for that person whether they're reapplying or whether they're being reappointed, or if it's somewhere in between. I think it really does muddy the waters. I think I've always been happy with Council's policy, which we are across the board, and needing to go out to the market. I think that means we know who is out there and can be assured of having the best people in those positions. If there are board members and they're unsure if they've got the confidence of council, then that's a simple communication issue. That is, to me, that's not a big deal to be addressed. So I would like to move an amendment to remove the changes to 3.8.
Well, you've got an alternate motion there already, councillor.
It's an amendment.
No,
so
I've just got advice. It's an alternate, and if the substantive fails, then we come to yours.
So I would like to move it as an amendment, subject that council adopts.
Well, have you got a seconder?
Yes, Councillor McLeod.
You're happy to
Sorry,
make it
when I brought it up, I said it was an amendment and it was to be subject to.
No, I got advice and it was an alternate, but now you're going to go to it. Yeah, you're doing
So
something
I'm moving
else.
it as an amendment, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, but you're putting something else
so-
up, not what's there.
I'm just about to clarify what I'm putting up there because I may well have not been clear enough with governance. So I'm moving it as an amendment that council adopt the Central Economic Development Agency appointment of directors policy, subject to the deletion of the proposed changes to section 3.8.
Just give us a moment, but we'll have to type.
I mean, it makes more sense to test this aspect of it before addressing the substantive.
Is that what we're meant to be doing? Is that?
So you probably need to delete as recommended by the Electoral College as well, given that the amendment would change that. So if you delete as recommended by the Electoral College. So for me, this is about best practice. This is about consistency across council, and I don't believe just because Manawatu have a preference that we should necessarily succumb to changing something that I've heard many of you around the table state as being a good practice for many years now. I think, yeah, I have been uncomfortable with the use of the exception, and for that reason I think we need a cleaner process, where it's clear to everyone how long a term is. It's the same as what we're all doing now, colleagues. We're going out to our community. It's a contestable process, whether or not we come back to this table. So yes, I realise it's more cumbersome in terms of the process that might mean, how many interviews that might mean for the Electoral College, and I respect that those who have been doing that have put in some hours. But from my perspective, this is best practice, and it does mean that we have more certainty about making sure that we've got the best calibre people doing that work.
Okay, we're speaking to the amendment now. We've got that clear. Look, just a couple of comments. This isn't best practice. This is not Institute of Directors best practice at all. The amendment. Well, first of all, we've got a partner in this, and this will absolutely turn into a cluster tomorrow if this succeeds. Not that you need to take that as the whole reason why you wouldn't vote for this. We haven't used the exception clause. We've brought it back, and you've said no. So we've gone through the proper process every single time. So that is not 100% correct. It's not just the chair's discretion. It would come back through the 6 members of the Electoral College. And again, I just state, if you don't want us there, then it's no use having us on the Electoral College, because we're wasting our time. But the main thing is we would be wasting the time of really, really good people and the talent that we have on our boards, and in this case, this really important board actually in terms of economics. So I realise that people's level of comfort with that is really, really low, and I think it comes down to a trust thing, of trusting your Electoral College members. If you don't, then perhaps it just comes back to council, and I don't know how it would be very unwieldy, but and our partners certainly wouldn't be happy, and maybe it starts to break it all down. But I just don't think this isn't good practice. It's just people's level of risk, and what they determine is their own good best practice. So please don't vote for this amendment. I appreciate that some of you have different views around the rolling over process or the exceptions, but I do think we can manage that and keep everybody in the room. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Just had a question to the mover of the amendment. In your speak to your amendment, you said that you weren't happy with the exception circumstances, but your amendment would bring back in the exceptional circumstances apply clause. So is that what you were intending? Because in the version that I have here, and I presume it's the same for everybody, the line, all director vacancies for CEDA are to be advertised unless exceptional circumstances apply, is crossed out. So if you're saying delete the changes in 3.8, then that would then be back in, and is that what you intended? That's my question.
No, that's not what I intended. So my intention is to delete the change to the first term board member not needing to go through that contestable process and just being able to be reappointed. So I'm looking at the top part. So if I need to make some further changes, I'm open to that. Sorry, I've missed that part that you read out. Whereabouts is it?
It's at the bottom of 3.8. It's a single line. No, it's the change. It says deletion of changes in 3.8.
To be advertised unless exceptions.
Anyway, I mean,
So it would need to say that all director vacancies for CEDA are to be advertised.
Okay, well, then you'll need to make that change. I haven't got any further comment to make because I think I've said what I think is important. So I'll leave it at that. But I just wanted to point out that you weren't perhaps achieving what you thought you were achieving.
Mr Mayor, can I make an adjustment to make that clear? Apologies, it's that last line, to leave the last line, all director vacancies for CEDA are to be advertised, full stop. Is governance able to include that, or what's the simplest way to achieve what we're trying to achieve?
Do you just want to write that down? We'll just take a minute. We're doing this on the fly, and bring it up. Councillor McLeod.
Excuse me. Is it? All right, cool, sorry. Thank you, Mr Chair. Very happy to support in favour of the amendment put forward by Councillor Naylor. I think the points have already been made perfectly. I think I also agree with some of the councillors that have spoken earlier on around the need for us to actually go to the market and actually source that there may be, for example, people that are better suited than the incumbent. And again, I take the view of Councillor Johnson, who actually said also that this is not against us, this is not about us being against a particular director on the board or anything, on the agency, but it's more about actually going out to the market and giving everyone an opportunity to come in and submit an application, and then also reviewing those CVs that are coming in and finding whether someone is actually better suited for those positions as well. I think this also removes any temptation for nepotism, or like what was said earlier on, friends looking after friends sometimes as well. It's not that we don't trust the Electoral College, but we also want a robust process or a robust system that actually is in line with the principle of natural justice. And I think that should be at the heart of every recruitment processes. So I'm entirely in favour of this. This is not against any directors or against or any decision being made by the Electoral College, or it's not about us not actually trusting our colleagues who are on the Electoral College, but we're simply saying that this should go out to the market and also have an opportunity through under the principle of natural justice, give an opportunity to anyone to want to come onto the board, and should they be suited to be on the board, to become a director, then if they have the skills, we trust that the Electoral College is going to make that decision. But it's all about giving everybody a fair go, just like Councillor Naylor highlighted earlier on. We also go and get interviewed by the community every 3 years, and nothing gets rolled on until we've had that interview and people have actually voted us back in. It's the same process here, and it's fairly in line with the Institute of Directors guidelines around recruitment. And so I'm in favour of this. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Councillors, the key word here is discretion. And unfortunately, by the sounds of it, the process Councillor Michelard outlined is exactly the process that Councillor Bowen just outlined, by clarifying in 3.8 that we are talking about not needing to go through a full formal appointment process, the same as Councillor Dennison outlined at the start of the debate here, is that we're not saying that we just appoint people willy-nilly with no consideration, yada, 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 but if somebody's been on the board for 3 years, with due consideration to 3.8i, or 1, 2, 3 and 4, which all seem like reasonable considerations to give if someone's been on the board, that they have the discretion not to put that person through a full appointment process, which seems quite reasonable. As well as the fact that this amendment would get rid of B, reappointment for 6 months or less, which removes the necessary flexibility and discretion that may be useful to a director finishing off the term of a project or a particularly large piece of work. I can recall recently, I think we appointed somebody for 6 months just to get them through to the next stage before we went back out to the market. So, although I sympathise with the argument of the mover, the seconder, and other councillors, I'm not dissatisfied with how CEDA is performing. I'm not dissatisfied with how the Electoral College is performing. I'm not dissatisfied with giving them discretion. And to Councillor Bellon's point, remove it or don't remove it, either way, I think it was 1.4, gives the Electoral College the ability to utilise discretion anyway. So I don't think we get anything by irritating our 50% co-owner to achieve something that is already pretty much what the policy allows by giving the discretion of the Electoral College to not go through a full appointment. So I'm quite happy with where we're at, and I'm happy to review the policy in the future again if a problem rears its head, but it seems to be, like, to me anyway, like these changes are quite sensible to enable the college to have discretion, so I won't support the amendment.
Okay, right, a reply, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just addressing the point raised by you, Mr Mayor, where you felt that the what I've suggested isn't best practice according to the Institute of Directors. I have just double-checked the advice from the Institute of Directors, which they are saying that Institute of Directors supports the processes where existing board members are assessed annually and participate in a competitive director election process as it prioritises the organisation's long-term needs and ensures fresh perspectives are considered. And why it's best practice is because it promotes board renewal, it focuses on organisational needs, it ensures objective selection, and it prevents stagnation. Now, best practice is obviously annually. We're not suggesting that, but I think 3 yearly it is appropriate, and definitely not 6 yearly. I think where you have a board, it's very easy for a chair to become chummy with board members and simply want to roll over people for the ease of it. I think unless we have good policy in place to ensure a contestable process, so that's why I'm just not comfortable with what 3.8 allows. I think there may be small things that may also need to change as a result of perhaps the issue that Councillor Wood has raised. But fundamentally what I'm saying here today is I can't just sit back and approve that, where it's suggesting something that's what I believe is far from best practice. So let's actually remove that for a start. Let's remove 3.8 for a start. If we need to go back to the drawing board to tidy up bits here and there, then I'm up for that. I'd rather have good process. So yes, I just wanted to clarify that point as the Mayor had sort of disputed the fact that actually what we're suggesting here is good practice.
No, I'm not going to comment. We'll vote on the amendment, please. Voting on the amendment in the red there. It has failed. 5 votes for and 9 against. Somebody didn't vote. Okay. Is that 14? 510. 510. Okay, we're going to go to the substantive. Sorry, we've got a lot to do today. I mean, spent a lot of time on $10,000 in our policy, but anyway. Okay, got the recommendation, the substantive up there, that I'm not going to read it again. I'm not going to even speak to it. We're going to vote on it. Thank you. and has passed 11 votes for and 4 against. Right, moving through to the waste. The waste minimisation and, waste management minimisation. No? Oh, you do. Okay, we'll vote. That is passed, 14 votes for, none against, thank you. All right, we'll move through to number 16, which is the Civic Cultural Precinct, 6 monthly update, and invite Glenn Bunny, our property manager, to present that. That's on page 75 of your papers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. Glenn Bunny, Manager Property. Report's fairly self-explanatory, 6 monthly update on the Civic Cultural Precinct project since the last update was tabled in February 25. I'll take it as read, happy to answer questions. A couple key points to note, the procurement process that was run in April culminated with the appointment of 22 as our expert advisory consultant to assist with the work. The steering group met again on the 22nd of August and had a productive conversation focusing on the timeline and the project plan which is attached to the report, and we received some feedback on that as well. And a key thing to note, I think, that the project team and the consultants are focusing on implementation, funding, investment aspects, as well as other considerations up front, because the last thing we want to do is design a plan, come up with a strategy, and then have to answer the question of how we go about implementing it. So in light of lots of conversations, lots of fiscal pressure, we are bringing that to the forefront. So we can design a plan and then have implementation strategies and identify diversified funding and activation strategies at the same time, which is an important aspect, I think, for making sure the project is successful. But happy to take questions.
All right, thanks, Glenn. Any questions from... You're at the right time of the day. Oh no, there is, sorry. And Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Glenn. I guess what have we got in place to make sure that this time round we get what we're hoping for from our consultant?
Good question, Councillor. I think lessons learned are applied. So we're not starting from scratch in isolation of previous work. I think there's still a lot of good things to capture and garner from previous iterations of this work. And we have discussed and applied some of the reasons and factors why maybe we didn't launch in terms of physical work and activation, etc., from the last iterations of this project. So that was a conscious conversation right from day one. We can't guarantee success, but we are cognizant of those things. And as I alluded to, some of those activation implementation strategies, which are normally left to the end of a project like this, have been brought forward. So the design and the practicality of making this a real project and having real things happen as a result has been brought to the forefront of our thinking. But we are still in initiation, so.
Okay, I see you've got an EM workshop planned for just after the election, I presume, is it? In February?
There's a workshop planned for social housing and the property reviews. And then the timeline does have councillor workshops in the draft timeline and work plan.
Yeah.
But as a result of some of the feedback from the steering group, we will recalibrate some of the ordering of that and bring that back.
So what does that mean?
We received feedback from some councillor members on the steering group that the councillor workshops should happen before stakeholder engagement and engagement with other aspects of the market. We've heard that, and that'll be recalibrated and reset.
Okay. All right. So what kind of a time scale are we working to, for instance, to get some solution for the library, for example?
So the library is an interesting, it's sort of a subset project in itself, and there is a consideration with how it integrates with the Civic Cultural Precinct and then the broader property portfolios and then the broader library network. At the moment, we are undertaking a desktop review of all of the work that's been undertaken on the Central Library to refresh the findings of those reports and come up with a plan with a timeline and costings against each one of the work streams that have to be undertaken to form a full view of what the library in its current situation would take to remedy and amend and refit for the future purpose.
And when might we expect that information?
I'm expecting that draft report by the end of this week.
Okay, so will it be coming to council
Yes.
in October?
As soon as we can bring it up. That this, whilst we'll receive that first consultancy piece, we'll then have to digest that. There'll be some iterative conversations, but at some stage, as soon as we can, that will come back to council to seek endorsement to proceed or not and provide those options.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 84, at the timeline there. And in September, I'm presuming that's this year, this September, it's got the vision, priorities and funding options there. Is there any elected member involvement in determining priorities or?
Yes, councillor, there will be. So this is a draft work plan and draft timeline for feedback. We haven't formally asked for feedback, but I thought it was important to add it to this 6-monthly update as a timely opportunity to inform councillors what the timeline and those work streams looked like. And we'll design the best way to have a fuller councillor engagement, in addition, I guess, to the steering group meeting that was last week.
Okay, and are steering group minutes shared with elected members?
They will be shared widely, yes.
They will be. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to the scope and the indicative, can you just remind me what the budgets are that we've got in our long-term plan for this project?
Yep, so the funding envelope is across 3 years. This year I think it's 90-something thousand, and then the 2 subsequent years are about 100,000. We will need to engage with you all about that program and the funding and the staging of the funding. I have a concern that doing this over 3 years possibly isn't the best way forward, but that will require us to come to you as a group and seek endorsement to change that funding over that period of time.
Okay, and the scope, can I just understand what's is included in the precinct?
So the precinct is from this building down to the end of this block, I guess, culminating in the Globe Theatre, including the car park and the library, I guess, as an adjunct as well, because we still have to do a piece of work to understand how the library works with the Civic Cultural Precinct. Mm-hmm. But we're also doing this not in isolation to the broader property work. This is a subset of sorts in that broader consideration as well.
Great, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry if this is a naive question, but I've been around the table for 3 years now, and I've asked different officers and different councils and different people, and everybody has a different view on what the purpose of this project is and what we're trying to achieve, and whether it's just the library that we're looking at, or whether it's a wider commercial proposition, or all of those things. So, in your view, what is the end goal of this project?
In my view, the end goal of this project is an activated civic cultural precinct which contributes to the activation of the broader CBD area and has a combination of civic and, I guess, private industry activations within it.
Sure, so what does that mean? Does that mean inner city living, or does that mean building a new theatre, or does that mean demolishing the library and building a new one? The scope, to me, it seems like it's got such a wide scope. So at what point will we see some kind of progress? Because I haven't seen anything in 3 years.
So the consultants have been with us working actively, I guess, since May. Their first step was to engage with us, understand what the appetite was, understand what the previous iterations of this project were. There's quite a bit of work on a desktop basis for them to understand, because we don't want to start from scratch and necessarily waste that investment and the time of previous efforts. We are close to, I guess, then having a meaningful conversation with elected members to answer questions, but I think all of those aspects or components are real considerations within the strategy and the footprint, and we need to make an intelligent case of looking at the options around what should go in, what shouldn't go in, where something is better placed. And I guess the library is a key consideration of that. And we can't do that overnight because there's a lot to consider. So the library in situ might be a significant investment to remediate, make it fit for purpose, do all of that work, and I think that could be extensive, and we need to work through those aspects of this work on an asset-by-asset basis and then have them inform a wider strategy. So it's quite involved.
So that's a bit different to my understanding, because what I just want to clarify, when this stage started, 6 months ago, it was pitched to me as, we've tried to tell the market what we want to do. This time we're going to let the market tell us what it would like to do with that space. We're open to any and all ideas. What you just said to me sounds a little bit the opposite. We're going to decide what our priorities are and then go to the market and tell them this is what we want to do. And when you say the last iteration I saw was effectively just a street layout design. So I'm just, at what point do we go, let's just see what interest there is in the private market to work in this space?
So that work is happening in parallel to designing our requirements, I think, Councillor. So it's a combination of all of those things. So by no means am I suggesting that we come up with our wish list or the things that we can or can't do. I think we need to do that work as well as speak and engage with the market at the right time in the right way to understand what the market would come in and seek for themselves, but how the market can also partner with the council and deliver an integrated, activated, full precinct. So that's the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Glenn. That's the questions done. All right. So, colleagues, we've got the Civic and Cultural Precinct 6 months. Well, yeah, I suppose it is quite near to 6 months from late May to early June to now. Update, and the recommendation is that we received the report titled Civic and Cultural Precinct 6 monthly update presented on the 3rd of September 2025. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Look, colleagues, we've had one catch up with the PSG, and it's really, I mean, they've really just started getting going on that. To be fair, I understand some nervousness on this. I mean, I share that as well. The older work has informed, so we're not starting from totally scratch. But I do think, and it's not a think, I know you've got to have a cohesive sort of plan or model. And Councillor Wood, your questions are really good in the sense of what are we going to get out of it. But to attract or see if what interest is out there or any partners, you've got to have something to put in. It's like a prospectus on the city and the cultural side of it. But we've always been told that we have something quite special here. But it's how do we attract some other partners or some people that want to do stuff that doesn't rely just on the ratepayer. We have a lot of assets here. We've got some earthquake-prone assets as well. But we've got some good assets in terms of the library. And again, Councillor Johnson, I share let's get moving on some of the library work, because it's an absolute crown jewel for us. This building, Tamanua, the inner city living aspect of what we could get going here. And remember, this is exactly how Hamilton and Christchurch started doing things. But we've got cinemas, we've got theatres, we've got hospo, excuse me, we've got commercial offices, retail in the Square, George, Coleman Mall, Main Street precinct, if you want to call it that. So plenty of opportunity. It's really just now we're going to allow the consultants and the wider team that's working on this to bring us back stuff. And they know they've got to bring everything back into the chamber. So again, some of you may be worried that there's some decisions being made. There's no decisions being made. But what we are trying to do is just get something engaged. So the wider development community, and when I say wider development community, I'm talking New Zealand, know that Palmerston North is in the market for this. Because I don't think it's going to be all of just our locals. So, yeah, we've started the process and we need to keep, and we've got good people working on it like Glenn, so hope you can support it. Nobody else is speaking, so we'll put it to the vote. Thank you. All right, that's 15 votes for, none against, thank you. Up to number 17, it's our dog control report, our annual section 10A, and I'll invite Angela and Ross up to speak to us, please. Page 85 of your papers.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Angela Lumby, Manager of Environmental Protection. Ross is actually going to give some highlights of the report and then we'll open for questions.
Hi, Ross McDermott, Team Leader, Animal Management and Education. So the number of dogs in the city has, the number of dogs in the city's had an annual maximum of 9,628, which represents 2.68% increase from the year prior. This incremental increase sits above the 10-year average of the dog number increases in the city. Of the 8,089 dog owners, slightly under a third of dog owners hold preferred ownership. This means that they are able to demonstrate an understanding of the requirements of owning a dog and the benefit from that is lower dog registration fees. The number of complaints received increased by just under 10% to 3,306, with the most significant being roaming dogs and roaming secured dogs, making up 45.9% of complaints. Barking dogs accounted for 25.7% of complaints. Reported dog attacks decreased across the year by 12.8%, with 123 attacks being reported during the year. 38 of these were reported on being on a person, and the remaining 85 were on dogs or other animals. On the 27th of November 24, officers gladly relocated dogs from the expired dog pound to the amazing Te Whare Kauru Animal Shelter. Administrative support is being provided through existing services, enabling officers to focus on core tasks. A recently developed heat map reporting provides visual oversight of complaints around the city. This allows the team to direct efforts where they need to be to both improve efficiencies and visibility in the community. Future uses for this could see us targeting education for the likes of bike prevention or managing aggression in properties around the city. In the next 6 months, officers will be seeking to run a communications engagement campaign to encourage the reporting of dog and owner problems to council and or other agencies who are best placed to address them. Also across the next financial year, we're seeking to build further capacity within the team to apply an education and customer-centric approach to all our customer complaints received. Recently, officers have established processes between police and SPCA for how dogs are managed after hours due to change in practices for the SPCA, where their inspectors are no longer attending complaints after hours. A trial is to be conducted during the 26-27 financial year with Canine Friends Pet Therapy Charity, post their submission at the annual budget deliberations, where they will receive free registration for their dogs in their agency that have been working for more than 1 year and conduct at least 2 hours of work per month. Their current total number of dogs which qualify is 28. Happy for questions.
Thanks, and we do. Councillor Barn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might just be reading this wrong, so if you wouldn't mind helping me with it. But the first bullet point in 1.4 talks about an increase in the number of dogs. And then it says the increase is thought to be influenced by economic pressures and the costs associated with owning a dog, which I thought would be reasons for decreasing dog ownership. So can you explain that to me? The first bullet point at 1.4.
Yeah. So over the last 2 years, we've sort of seen a bigger increase, whereas it started to slow again.
So it's a reduced level of increase,
correct,
which you think is because people can't afford to have a dog, otherwise it would be more.
Correct, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ross. Angela. Couple of questions. One is, have we been able to identify any income generating opportunities from the spare capacity at the animal shelter? Because there was some talk about that in previous years.
So we've done a bit of research around partnering with other councils or other agencies and that sort of thing. What we found is we would need to do things on quite a large scale. For example, Manawatu contracts their full animal control services to Rangitikei District Council, and we would need to take something like that on to see benefit out of it. Simply holding dogs for a week at a time didn't really generate that much revenue.
Right, okay, so the arrangement you have with the SPCA, is that on a goodwill basis?
For the community, yes. What's been happening is police are getting dogs for either welfare complaints or animal control type complaints after hours and not knowing what to do with them, resulting in them maybe taking them to a vet clinic or taking them home, holding on to them until the next day. So we've sat down with police and SPCA and said, look, ring us, we'll come get it and we'll sort it out the next business day.
Okay. And the other question might seem a bit picky, but when you've talked about the numbers of dogs that have been euthanased in the actual report itself, not in your paper to council, and you've talked about the reductions, which are good. I'm just trying to get the actual numbers here. You've said that there was a 17% euthanasia rate this year compared to 26% the year before, but then you've said that was a 9% reduction, but it must be much more than a 9% reduction. It's a reduction of 9%, if you see what I mean, but it must be more than a 9% reduction. Do you follow how I'm thinking about this? I'm not sure if I've explained that very well. So where you've said, 34% reduction, that's a significant reduction, basically, in terms of numbers. But I understand that from 26% to 7% is 9% less, but it's more than a 9% reduction, I suppose, is what I'm saying. Is my interpretation? Do you understand what I'm asking? Not really. I haven't made it very clear.
You're asking. I'm just not sure if I can answer
I'm just wondering if we've expressed that in the report to demonstrate the significant reduction that it is, because my understanding would be it would be much more than a 9% reduction.
I think we can look into that and take that offline just to check the figures around that. I think that might be the best way forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ross, for the narrative just around the high points. My question really is just around dog attacks, and you say it's trending, less dog attacks by a number of percent this year, but that's comparable to last year. But there's actually dog attacks actually are trending up. My question really is around, do we understand that in the context of per head of population, or do we have any more contextual data around that? And perhaps comparable data with, say, for example, Auckland, who are reporting a big uptick in the number of dog attacks and also roaming dogs and undesexed dogs.
I probably don't have close enough comparisons to answer all of that for you, but I did do some digging into this. Let's see where I started there. Yeah, so it's difficult to compare this reporting year to other councils, as we're typically one of the first councils to put our report through. When I looked at last year's dog attacks, the average was about 14.3% attacks for every 1,000 dogs owned, and our council sits at 14.5%. So with our attacks coming down, I would assume that we're sitting sort of in the middle range in comparison to other councils.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions from me. Page 91, I see that the number of preferred dog owners are decreasing by 3%, down to 2,649, which actually is only about 32% of dog owners are preferred owners. I'm just wondering what the financial benefit is for preferred owners, and whether you've got any understanding of what the main barriers are for more dog owners becoming preferred owners?
I think most would see the application fee as a barrier. That was put in, I think, 4 years ago now. And the reason for that was every year we would receive between 300 to 500 preferred owner applications, and a good proportion of those would be declined.
Sorry, 300 to 400 what applications?
Applications for people to be preferred owners. So this was about 4 years ago. And so the application fee was put in to encourage people to actually see if they met the conditions before applying, rather than just throwing their hat in the ring. It was an effort to reduce workload and make sure we're focusing efforts in the right area.
And how much is the application fee?
I believe it's $62 or $64.
And how much less, if they do become a preferred owner, do they pay than someone who's not a preferred owner in terms of a year's registration? More or less than $62?
Yeah, so the application fee, once you've paid that, you start seeing the benefits on the second year of registration. I think it's $182 for a general registration and $99 for preferred owner. So that's sort of the gap there.
So it's a bigger than $62 gap then. So
Correct.
If someone pays that money and becomes a preferred owner, then they're saving money already even on the first year.
Yeah.
So what's the barrier from more people? Do we need to make a bigger incentive? Or why are we only getting 32% uptake on preferred owners, dog owners?
Yeah, I probably can't answer that.
Has anyone looked into this, or has any work been done around this previously?
Well, not recently, no.
And so if we wanted further work to be done around that, when would be the best time to give that direction?
Well, we can undertake that when we're looking at the advertising of the registration program for next year.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is around the page 90. So looking at the fees, there was a 7% increase across dog registration fee categories, but the fees that related to pound fees for all animals other than dogs remain unchanged from the previous year. So 0% increase. I'm just wondering in terms of what the rationale I know it's not time to be setting the fees now, but just looking at that seems a bit of an anomaly that there's not even a CPI increase. What's the reason for not increasing the pound fees?
In part, it's because we want to create the behaviour of being able to provide the dogs back to the owners. So, and we don't want the cost for that to be, the impound fees for that to be a barrier for people collecting their dogs in the first part.
Okay, so who should be picking up the additional cost as a result?
Through the chair, if I could add something to that, please. Kerry Lee Probert, General Manager, Development and Regulatory. Elected members may recall that at the time of fees and charges, what officers spoke about was the perverse consequences of increasing the fees at the shelter. If we run the risk of putting the fees up, dogs will remain longer in the shelter and that cost will fall to the ratepayer. Alternatively, it could lead to additional dogs being euthanised. So that decision was made at that time. We're currently in the process of starting working on our fees and charges now so that we will be able to provide further answers around those those kinds of questions when we get to that period later on in the year.
Okay, thank you. So just one follow-on question from that then. Do we have, apologies if I haven't seen it in this report, do we have any stats around the occupancy of the shelter? Oh.
Yeah, that's 93, 41%.
41%. Okay, thanks. That's all from me.
Councillor Sabellin.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Paragraph 1.5 and also in the attached report, you talked about the comms and engagement plan that's coming up. And we've had some criticisms in the past few years for dogs and for animals generally, that our education and our advice has been more targeted towards what the complainant can do to mitigate the risk or the nuisance rather than targeted at the owner of the animal. And so I was interested to see in your attachment that that aspect of owner education would be addressed, and I wondered if you could give us a little more information about how we'd go about educating those owners.
Yeah, most of the website content's, I guess, directed generally at the general public and non-dog owners, simply because officers, when they attend complaints, can interact with the dog owner and give them direct education that they need at the time. That's probably a good point, that more wider education should be available to dog owners as well. A key focus of this piece is going to be around encouraging people to report problems to council rather than just on social media. That you might have noticed that through the Linklater work that's come through. There's a lot of things that get put on social media, we never hear about it. And, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And I just had one more. At 1.9 of your attachment, it's talking about dog attacks, and it notes there that the definitions of the severity ratings for attacks are not solely relating to the injury that's sustained, and that there are a bunch of other elements that contribute to the ratings. I just wondered, is there a statutory reason from that, or a bylaw, or what's the reason why you would assess the severity of a dog attack with so many factors?
It's typically because through the enforcement process, we're looking at everything that's happened, the owner's history, the dog's history, and not just the injury that's been sustained. You might have an owner that, a dog that's just nipped someone, created bruising and scratching, but the dog's done it 8 times, and creates that differentiation there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. On Appendix 2, you have details going back 5 years, but in Appendix 1, you just do it for 1 year. Is it possible to have those figures back 5 years?
Yeah, we can try that.
And one other quick question. You've got a breed down, Shepherd German. Should it not be German Shepherd?
That's just the way it's listed in our reporting system.
Could that be changed, please?
I can turn them around, yes.
The correct name is German Shepherds. Thank you.
I won't go there, it's too late. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. I've had a bit to do with dogs recently, and recently borrowed one and took it to Linklater Park. I was quite surprised I came across more than one person with a dog that didn't have it registered and never had it registered. Do you think that's a problem in the city with unregistered dogs, people just not bothering?
I think that's a nationwide problem, yes.
Any idea with what sort of numbers? How long's a piece of string, I suppose?
I think most councils estimate around 10%.
Okay.
And that's probably just a made-up number.
And when dogs are brought or picked up off the street, say, and they're not registered, what do we do in that respect?
So any dog that's not registered gets impounded. Yep.
And then it's registered?
Yep. So any dog that's impounded must be microchipped and registered before it's released.
And the Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Ross. In anticipation that I've asking a weird question, my apologies, but what is a roaming secured dog?
Yeah, to separate those two, roaming is just the dog's taking itself for a walk, and secured is someone's captured it and is holding on to it.
Ah, right, thank you. Now, still on 1.4, there were 38 attacks on a person. Did any of those result in a conviction? Court?
Not on a person. We had one prosecution last year, and that was for a dog attack on a dog.
Okay, thank you. And who charges that? Do you raise that with the police? Do you identify that, or is it taken by the victim?
Council prosecute those, either internally or via an external agency.
Thank you very much. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Ross. So we've got our recommendation there around our dog control report 24-25, and a recommendation that we receive the report titled Annual Section 10A Dog Control Report 2024-25, presented today on 30 September 25. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Okay, there are some comments. Let's go to them. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Just want to say that I thought it was a very good report and had some encouraging trends in it, not the least of which is the fact that, again, my maths, the number of dogs that we've euthanased has gone down 37% since last year. And that's due, I know, to the hard work of the animal management team in assessing which dogs would be suitable for rehoming if they're not picked up by owners, and keeping them and advertising for homes for them. So I think that's commendable, and I know that the public are actually very happy when we try and do that and not just resort to euthanasia, so well done for that. And then the second thing I think that's quite encouraging is the focus on education, because I think that's where we'll probably get the best bang for our buck in trying to prevent complaints and incidents. So thank you very much for the report, and I'm glad to receive it.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Once again, a useful report. Just a couple of things that stand out. I realise now is not the time to be looking at our fee structure, but if officers are starting work on it, I did want to make a few comments. Already we've had to approve an increase for rate subsidies to go from up to 20% to up to 40% now. And so I think we need to be really mindful that that level of subsidisation isn't taken for granted in terms of the fee structure, particularly if we're not even increasing pound fees at all, not even by CPI. I think that's an anomaly that I think, keeping fees low doesn't mean that nobody has to pay. It just means that the ratepayers are having to subsidise more, and they're having to subsidise more to dog owners who are needing to use those services. And so I think also trying to look at incentivising the preferred owners. I mean, already preferred owners are getting a financial benefit even in the first year, but whether that's well understood, I don't know. Whether it's a communications thing or whether there needs to be more of an incentive, I think that's an area that perhaps could be looked at.
All right, we'll vote, please. That's passed, 15 votes for, none against. All right, we're getting into home straight of part one, so bear with us, people. Number 18 is our council work schedule, page 105. I'll just go to the CE. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, through the Chair. Just probably item number one, which is a report back on investment options for Palmerston North Airport. I know that the elected members have been waiting for this for a little while. We've done some initial sort of desktop assessments around that. The work is with our manager property, Glenn Bunny. He does have a few other things in front of him at the moment, including property reviews. So as soon as we've got clear of some of those big items, he is looking at this as he goes, but it's highly likely, it won't be this term of council that'll be getting the report on that. It will be with a new term of council. Other than that, your last meeting in October looks rather full.
Yeah, there's 10 on there that I can see, so yeah. Okay, so we've got a recommendation that we receive the work dated today, 3rd of September 2025. Happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. There being no questions, we'll vote. That is passed unanimously, 14 votes for, none against. All right, we will now go to receive our recommendations from number 19 on the order paper, from our Strategy and Finance Committee meeting of the 20th of August 2025, and I'll go to the Chair, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the minutes of the Strategy and Finance Committee meeting of the 20th of August for adoption. Thank you.
Great. Seconded by the Deputy, Councillor Naylor. Any matters arising? There being none, we will vote. That has passed 14 votes for and 1 abstention. Right, we'll go to move into part 2 first, and then we'll grab a quick coffee after that. Much needed. So we'll look to move into part 2, and for the reasons of negotiations, third-party commercial and privacy. So I'm happy to move that we go to part 2, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. And we'll put it to the vote, please. Okay, it's passed 15 votes, none against. All right, we will